Rebecca Beck Lawson grew up in the vast, unbroken plains of Montana, where the sky stretched like a canvas of endless possibilities, and the wind whispered secrets only the patient could hear. Her earliest memories were of crouching beside her father on the edges of open fields, her small hands wrapped around a weathered rifle as he taught her how to measure the distance to a faraway tree, how to account for wind, and how to breathe with deliberate calm. She wasn't yet 10, but already she understood that shooting wasn't about power. It was about precision, control, and patience. Her father would often tell her, "The bullet is lazy. It won't go where you want it unless you think for it first." Life on the plains was quiet, and that quiet shaped her. While other children her age were climbing trees, playing video games, or chasing fleeting thrills, Rebecca preferred to watch the clouds, study the subtle shifts of light, or track deer across the open fields. She noticed everything: the way the wind bent the grass, the distant cry of a hawk, the faintest ripple in the stream signaling the movement of fish below. Her father encouraged this awareness, insisting that a good sniper was first and foremost an observer. See everything. Say nothing. Move only when necessary, he would tell her. By the age of 12, Rebecca had become a remarkable marksman. The neighborhood kids would gather to watch her hit tin cans at improbable distances, though she never sought applause. When she missed, she analyzed every shot, taking notes in a small, leather-bound journal she called her field codex. Her father smiled with pride, but he also taught her something more essential: the weight of responsibility. "Every shot tells a story, Beck," he said. "Sometimes it saves lives. Sometimes it ends them. Never forget which is which." Tragedy struck when Rebecca was 16. Her father took her on a hunting trip in the early spring, just before the snow melted. It was supposed to be a teaching day, one final lesson in patience and tracking. But an accident changed everything. A misstep on a slick ridge, a rifle discharged accidentally, and her father was gone. Rebecca felt the world collapse around her. The plains that once seemed endless now felt empty, barren, and cruel. In that moment, she swore she would honor her father's teachings, not with anger or fear, but with relentless focus and mastery. The years following his death were hard. Her mother, a quiet woman who had spent decades managing a small family farm, grieved deeply but encouraged Rebecca to continue her father's lessons. Rebecca spent long hours alone in the fields, practicing with every rifle her father had left her, learning how to adjust for wind gusts, humidity, and elevation. She experimented with long-distance shots that would challenge even seasoned hunters. Word of her skill spread quietly through her small town, though Rebecca never sought recognition. She wasn't interested in trophies. She wanted control, precision, and the calm that came with mastery. High school became a different kind of battleground. While classmates worried about social life and parties, Rebecca focused on perfecting her craft. She studied physics, aerodynamics, and even meteorology, understanding that a successful shot required knowledge of far more than just a steady hand. She kept meticulous notes about each session, drawing diagrams of wind angles, bullet trajectories, and target distances. Her peers whispered that she was obsessive, but they didn't understand the peace she found in calculation and discipline. It was her way of honoring her father's legacy, a promise she had made under the Montana sky. By the time she turned 18, Rebecca was ready for the next step. The military beckoned, not for glory, not for combat, but as a place where her skills could be honed, measured, and used with purpose. She enlisted with quiet determination, her acceptance letter folded carefully in her pocket, like a map to a future she had already envisioned. In her heart, she carried her father's voice. Precision isn't just about hitting the target. It's about knowing yourself and controlling what you can. The rest comes with patience. Before leaving Montana, Rebecca spent one last evening on the plains. The wind danced over the grass, and the sky turned gold with the setting sun. She raised her rifle one final time, aimed at a distant marker she had set years ago, and fired. The bullet struck exactly where she intended, as if guided by some invisible hand. She exhaled slowly, feeling a calm she hadn't known since her father's death. In that moment, she understood the life she wanted, a life of precision, focus, and purpose. The road ahead would not be easy. The military would challenge her in ways Montana never had. She would be tested, doubted, and even dismissed by those who underestimated her, because she was a woman, because she was quiet, because she did not flaunt her skill. But Rebecca carried more than a rifle. She carried the teachings, discipline, and resolve of a man who had once said, "The world respects precision, Beck, not noise. Not speed, precision." As she drove away from the only home she had ever known, the plains stretched endlessly behind her, golden and quiet. She felt the weight of her father's absence, but also the strength of his teachings. Every mile forward was a promise that she would live the lessons he had given her, and that one day, her calm, precise hand would make a difference where it truly mattered. The girl from Montana had become more than just a marksman. She had become a student of patience, a practitioner of discipline, and a future legend in the making. And though she did not yet know it, the day would come when she would handle a weapon that few could master and execute a shot that would be whispered about for years to come. A 3,247-meter kill that would earn her the awe of the most seasoned SEAL commander. But for now, she only focused on the basics, the wind, the scope, the heartbeat, and the lesson her father had etched into her very soul: control yourself, and the shot will follow. Rebecca Lawson arrived at Fort Benning on a crisp autumn morning, the horizon still tinged with gold and orange as the sun rose over the Georgia plains. She carried nothing but her duffel bag, a notebook full of meticulous calculations, and the quiet determination that had been instilled in her since childhood. The first sight of the massive barracks, echoing drill commands, and the harsh cadence of soldiers marching in perfect unison made her pulse quicken. She felt a strange mix of exhilaration and trepidation. This was nothing like Montana, but she knew that discipline, patience, and attention to detail would be her allies here, just as they always had been. Boot camp was brutal. Rebecca quickly learned that this world measured value not by skill alone, but by endurance, obedience, and psychological fortitude. Men who towered over her mocked her at first, testing her resolve with taunts and challenges. Some thought she was too small, too quiet, or too deliberate. Yet Rebecca thrived under scrutiny. While others rushed through drills, she observed, noticing every slip, every misstep, and adjusting herself accordingly. In the marksmanship range, her calm hand and unwavering focus immediately set her apart. Where recruits struggled to manage recoil, account for wind, and steady their breathing under pressure, Rebecca's shots were almost surgically precise. She became a quiet legend within weeks, earning the nickname Dead Calm, a title that carried respect in the very halls that once doubted her. It wasn't just physical skill that made Rebecca exceptional. It was her methodical mind. She studied the physics of each rifle, learning the subtle quirks of trajectory, bullet drop, and environmental conditions. Rain, wind, and humidity were no longer obstacles. They were variables to be calculated. Her notebook was filled with diagrams, tables, and formulas, each entry a testament to her obsession with mastery. Drill instructors, initially dismissive, began to watch her with a mix of admiration and caution. She's not fast, not flashy, but damn if she isn't perfect when it counts, one instructor muttered to another. After basic training, Rebecca's next step was sniper school, a crucible designed to test the mind, body, and spirit of any long-range shooter. Here, the pace was relentless, the nights long and the physical demands punishing. Students were sent into simulated hostile environments, required to navigate rough terrain, endure sleep deprivation, and calculate distances under extreme stress. Many broke under pressure, their confidence crumbling as bullets whistled by or targets blurred in the dim light. But Rebecca thrived. Her years in Montana had taught her to read the land, interpret wind, and remain perfectly still for hours. In a world of chaos, she was the one calm anchor. By her second week at sniper school, she caught the attention of Master Sergeant Caldwell, a grizzled veteran with decades of combat experience. He watched as Rebecca methodically assembled her M107 Barrett .50 rifle, checking every component, adjusting the optics, and calculating the ballistics for an imaginary 2,000-meter shot. Without a word, she fired, and the round struck the target dead center, a feat most students only achieved after months of practice. Caldwell raised an eyebrow. "You're either lying, Lucky, or the real deal," he muttered. Rebecca only nodded, her expression unreadable. She wasn't chasing accolades. She was chasing perfection. Her reputation soon spread beyond sniper school. A joint military program requested cross-trained snipers to support Navy SEAL teams in specialized reconnaissance operations. The idea of sending an Army sniper into a SEAL unit was controversial, especially a woman who had never seen combat. Yet Rebecca's skill and precision could not be ignored. When she received her orders for deployment, she didn't celebrate. She quietly packed her gear, ensuring every rifle, every scope, and every round was accounted for. Her father's teachings echoed in her mind. Preparation isn't luck. It's control. Before leaving for her first deployment, Rebecca spent a few final nights on a secluded range, practicing long-range shots beyond normal military standards. She experimented with the Barrett .50, learning its rhythm, recoil, and scope adjustments. Her hand didn't tremble. Her focus didn't waver. She could fire multiple rounds, each one precisely on target, adjusting for mirages, wind changes, and elevation. It was more than skill. It was art. And though she didn't know it yet, this expertise would soon be tested in ways that would define her career. When she finally arrived in Afghanistan, Rebecca stepped off the transport with a mixture of nerves and resolve. The heat, dust, and chaos of the forward operating base were worlds apart from Montana's serene plains. Yet she adapted quickly. Her calm presence earned the wary respect of the SEALs, who were skeptical of any attachment, especially one from the Army. Commander Jacob Rains, a seasoned SEAL with countless missions under his belt, observed her from a distance. He didn't yet understand her skill, but he noticed her steadiness, her methodical preparation, and the way she moved with quiet confidence. There was something about her that made him uneasy, not because she was a woman or a newcomer, but because she clearly operated on a different plane than everyone else around her. Rebecca's early missions involved reconnaissance, overwatch, and intelligence gathering. While others rushed into dangerous zones, she positioned herself at distant vantage points, scanning the terrain for movement, noting potential threats, and communicating critical information back to the team. Her reports were precise, concise, and invaluable. Slowly, Rains began to realize that her presence was not only beneficial, but indispensable. In one incident, she identified an insurgent observation post before anyone else had seen it, allowing the SEAL team to adjust their route and avoid a potential ambush. He began to view her not as an attachment, but as an equal, someone whose calm and precision could mean the difference between life and death. By the end of her first month, Rebecca had established herself as a figure of quiet authority. She was not the loudest, not the most aggressive, but she was unshakable. Her name began circulating quietly in military circles, whispered with a mix of disbelief and admiration. Those who observed her work noted something extraordinary. She seemed to calculate variables instinctively, predicting outcomes before others even considered them. And though she had yet to fire her Barrett .50 in a combat scenario, everyone around her sensed that when that moment came, it would be extraordinary. Evenings on the forward operating base offered little reprieve. The dust and heat were oppressive, the sounds of distant gunfire and artillery a constant reminder of the danger surrounding them. Rebecca would retreat to her small tent, meticulously clean her weapons, study maps, and plan for every conceivable scenario. While others sought rest or distraction, she focused on preparation, always anticipating the unknown. It was an obsession born of survival, discipline, and the desire to honor her father's teachings. Every calculation, every adjustment, every careful observation was a step toward mastery, toward the moment when precision would not just be a skill, but a necessity. By the end of her second month in country, Rebecca Lawson had become more than a rookie sniper or a quiet anomaly in a SEAL unit. She was a strategist, a tactician, and a calm force within the chaos of war. Her peers began to rely on her insight, her predictions, and her unerring skill with long-range shots. And though Commander Rains had not yet witnessed the full extent of her ability, he had started to recognize a hard truth. This quiet, disciplined sniper from Montana was about to change everything they thought they knew about precision, patience, and deadly efficiency. And so, as the sun dipped below the jagged Afghan mountains, casting long shadows across the valley, Rebecca stood at the edge of the forward operating base, Barrett .50 in hand. She inhaled the cool evening air, steadying herself. Every lesson from Montana, every hour spent practicing under her father's watchful guidance, had led to this moment. She was ready, not for glory, but for the responsibility that came with control, calculation, and the power to make life-and-death decisions from thousands of meters away. The Korangal Valley of Afghanistan was not forgiving. Rugged cliffs, jagged ridges, and dense forests carved a labyrinth of danger for anyone daring to traverse it. The valley had earned a grim reputation among soldiers. Insurgent ambushes, sniper duels, and sudden landmine explosions were all too common. For Rebecca Lawson, it was her first operational deployment alongside a Navy SEAL unit, a crucible that would test not only her skill, but her patience, judgment, and composure. Commander Jacob Rains had been briefed on the attachment of an Army sniper to his SEAL team. Initially, he had been skeptical. Deploying with a sniper outside his unit felt risky, a variable he didn't need in an environment where trust and cohesion could mean the difference between life and death. The fact that Rebecca was a woman added another layer of doubt to his assessment. But he was a professional. He would evaluate her strictly on performance. And from the moment he first saw her handle her gear with meticulous care, he knew she was no ordinary attachment. The first morning in the Korangal Valley began with a haunting silence. Mist clung to the cliffs like ghosts, and the roar of distant rivers cut through the valley with a cold, relentless clarity. Rebecca, positioned several kilometers ahead of the SEAL patrol, scanned the terrain through her spotting scope. Every ridge, every shadow, every movement was noted. She calculated ranges, anticipated enemy positions, and monitored wind shifts with the calm of a seasoned observer. For her, this was a familiar rhythm, one she had mastered in the open plains of Montana and honed through the rigors of sniper school. Her first test came sooner than expected. A SEAL reconnaissance team radioed in that movement had been detected along a ridge on the valley's far side. Rebecca adjusted her scope, measuring the distance, approximately 1,800 meters, compounded by a subtle crosswind. She reported the movement back to Commander Rains, who was skeptical at first. "Are you sure?" "That's just a shadow," he said. Rebecca's voice remained steady. "It's not a shadow, sir. Look at the angle. It's a man, crouched, carrying a pack. Possibly scouting." Rains observed her calculations, noting her methodical approach. Against his initial instinct, he trusted her assessment. The SEALs advanced with extreme caution, and Rebecca's prediction proved accurate. A lone insurgent fully armed had been watching their route. The team avoided the potential ambush thanks to her observation. Rains, though unwilling to admit it outright, was impressed. For the first time, he saw that her quiet demeanor masked a razor-sharp tactical mind. She didn't rush, didn't boast, and didn't seek recognition. She only delivered results. Over the next several days, Rebecca settled into the rhythm of the unit. Early missions involved overwatch and reconnaissance. While SEALs moved through the valley, she positioned herself on distant ridges, remaining hidden for hours on end. She endured bone-chilling nights, harsh winds, and intermittent rain, yet her focus never wavered. Every adjustment of her scope, every calibration of her Barrett M82 rifle was executed with surgical precision. Even the seasoned SEALs began to notice something unusual. She could anticipate patterns of movement in ways that seemed almost prophetic. Commander Rains began observing her more closely. He noticed her discipline, the way she carried herself with quiet authority, despite being the newest member of the unit. During a particularly tense night, as the team huddled in a ravine and whispered about enemy patrols, Rains caught her scanning the valley silently, finger lightly resting on the trigger guard. He approached cautiously. "How do you stay so calm?" he asked. Rebecca didn't look up. "I focus on what I can control, sir. The rest is noise," she replied softly. He frowned, realizing she had not only mastered her rifle, but also the mental discipline required to survive in a war zone. The first real combat test came unexpectedly. Intelligence reported that a high-value insurgent had been moving through the valley with a small convoy. The SEAL team's objective was to observe, report, and if necessary, neutralize the target. Rains devised a plan. He would lead the SEALs into the valley, while Rebecca provided long-range overwatch from a concealed ridge nearly 3 kilometers away. The plan was high risk. Any miscalculation could cost lives. Rains, though hesitant, had learned to trust her assessments. He assigned her the position closest to the enemy's anticipated path. Rebecca prepared meticulously. She cleaned her Barrett, recalibrated the scope, and rechecked every calculation. The wind in the valley shifted unpredictably, and she adjusted for subtle gusts that could throw a bullet off course. She worked in silence, her entire focus on the task ahead. Hours passed with nothing but the sound of wind and distant wildlife. She remained still, almost invisible, until movement finally flickered on the far ridge. A group of men, one clearly in command, moving with caution. Her breath slowed. This was the moment her training had prepared her for. She reported the target's position back to Rains, who coordinated the SEAL advance. The team moved cautiously, relying on her observation to avoid detection. Rebecca's calculations were precise. The distance, wind, and elevation all aligned. She didn't hesitate. Every adjustment, every breath, every second of patience brought her closer to a shot that would be remembered for years. Rains, observing through binoculars, felt a mix of awe and disbelief. He had seen many snipers in his career, but few operated with the combination of precision, patience, and composure that Rebecca displayed. Throughout the mission, the valley seemed to hold its breath. Every movement was critical. Every decision mattered. Rebecca's presence transformed the operation from a high-risk maneuver into a coordinated, almost flawless execution. The SEALs moved as if guided by an unseen hand, and Rains, who had initially doubted her abilities, now trusted her implicitly. By the time the convoy had passed the critical point, the SEALs had gained a tactical advantage, all thanks to her meticulous observation and calm presence. That night, back at the forward operating base, Rains finally spoke to her privately. "I doubted you, he admitted. "I thought an army sniper, especially a woman, couldn't keep up with us. I was wrong." Rebecca smiled faintly, a mix of exhaustion and quiet pride. "I'm not here to prove anything, sir. I'm here to do my job." His respect was genuine, earned not by words, but by the calm, lethal precision she had demonstrated in the valley. Rebecca Lawson's first mission in the Coincidental Valley marked a turning point. She had proven herself not only capable, but exceptional, integrating seamlessly with a team trained to question everyone and trust almost no one. Commander Rains began to see her not as an attachment, but as a peer, a sniper whose judgment and precision could alter the course of life and death operations. For Rebecca, the mission was validation that patience, discipline, and meticulous preparation could overcome even the harshest environments and the most skeptical of commanders. As she cleaned her rifle that night, under the faint glow of the base's perimeter lights, Rebecca reflected on how far she had come. From the plains of Montana to the ridges of Coincidental, every lesson from her father, every hour of study and practice, had prepared her for this moment. And though she did not yet know the full magnitude of her potential, she sensed that the greatest tests and the most remarkable shots of her career were still to come. The sun dipped below the jagged peaks of the Coincidental Valley, casting long shadows across the rugged terrain. Nightfall brought a chill that penetrated even the thickest layers of military gear. For most soldiers, darkness was a warning, a time to rest, to conserve energy for the dangers that daylight revealed. For Rebecca Lawson, it was the calm before a storm, a time for preparation, observation, and meticulous planning. The mission tomorrow would be unlike any she had faced before. Intelligence indicated that a high-value insurgent target, responsible for multiple attacks against coalition forces, would move through a critical ridge. The operation's success depended on precision, patience, and flawless execution, all qualities she had honed over years of practice. Rebecca's post was positioned nearly 3 kilometers from the target's anticipated path, atop a ridge that gave a sweeping view of the valley below. She laid out her Barrett M82.50 rifle, carefully disassembling and cleaning it, checking every component. The scope was wiped clean, the elevation and windage meticulously recalculated. She adjusted the bipod legs to account for the uneven ground, ensuring stability for the shot she knew might be impossible by most standards. Every detail mattered. A single miscalculation could jeopardize not only the mission, but lives of the SEAL team moving below. Commander Jacob Rains approached her position at dusk, silent except for the soft crunch of boots on loose gravel. He had spent hours observing her as she worked, fascinated by the calm authority she exuded. "How's she looking?" he asked quietly, keeping his voice low to avoid detection. Rebecca didn't look up immediately. She tilted the rifle slightly, aligning the scope with the ridgeline below. "Winds shifting at 2 degrees from the northwest," she murmured, her tone precise, clinical. "Temperature is dropping fast. It will affect bullet drop. I've accounted for it." Rains watched her without comment. She worked like a master artisan, her hands steady even as the cold seeped into her gloves. She cleaned the rifle, retightened screws, checked her scope alignment again, and then laid out reference markers to gauge mirage and elevation for the expected distance. She had prepared for every possible variable: humidity, air pressure, wind gusts, even the slight sway of her own body over extended periods of prone positioning. Her focus was absolute. There was no hurry, no arrogance, just relentless calculation. "I've seen snipers before," Rains admitted, almost to himself. "I've never seen anyone do it like this." Rebecca glanced up briefly, meeting his eyes. "It's not about speed or showmanship, sir. It's about controlling everything you can control. The rest is just noise." He nodded slowly, beginning to understand what made her exceptional. She wasn't relying on instinct alone. She relied on preparation, discipline, and patience, the very essence of long-range sniping. Hours stretched into night. Rebecca positioned herself in her hide, wrapped in a thin blanket to fend off the biting wind. She checked the night vision device, adjusted for infrared sensitivity, and reviewed maps of the area, plotting multiple potential paths the target could take. Every detail had a consequence. She thought of her father, recalling his words about patience, observation, and respect for the shot. Montana had taught her the rhythm of silence. Sniper school had taught her the precision of mathematics and mechanics. And now, the mountains of Afghanistan demanded both. The SEAL team prepared in parallel, moving cautiously into position along a path 2 valleys away. Rains coordinated with his point man, ensuring timing and angles were synchronized with Rebecca's overwatch post. They communicated via encrypted radio, relying on her eyes and calculations to guide their movement. Any misstep could reveal their position. Rebecca's updates were precise, succinct, and calm. She identified natural cover, estimated shadows, and predicted the enemy's reaction based on intelligence and terrain study. For Rains, it was both reassuring and disconcerting. He had seen many snipers, but few demonstrated this level of anticipation and control. As midnight approached, Rebecca ran through a mental checklist again. Rifle cleaned, scope adjusted, bipod stable, wind calculated, distance measured, breathing controlled, heart steady. Every variable had been considered. She allowed herself a brief moment of reflection, thinking of Montana's planes and her father's voice, reminding her that every shot carried responsibility. This was more than a test of skill. It was a measure of discipline, patience, and the ability to remain human in the midst of lethal precision. Sleep was impossible. Instead, she practiced controlled breathing, visualized the trajectory of the bullet, and adjusted for minor shifts in elevation and wind. She reviewed contingencies in her mind. If the target moved faster, if shadows obscured visibility, if the wind shifted suddenly. Her preparation was exhaustive. She had spent months, years, in fact, preparing for the kind of shot that most snipers could only dream of. And tonight, the moment was almost here. The valley lay in near total darkness. The only movement was the occasional ripple of wind over rocks and sparse vegetation. Rebecca's eyes swept over every inch of terrain through her scope, capturing details invisible to any untrained observer. She noted the subtle rise of heat mirages, the faint outlines of distant trees, the glint of metal that could betray enemy weapons. Every calculation mattered. Any misjudgment could cost the team below, or worse, compromise the mission entirely. Rains returned briefly before dawn, crouching beside her position. "You ready for this?" he asked, a rare note of uncertainty in his voice. Rebecca nodded without hesitation. "I've accounted for everything. It's about timing, patience, and letting the conditions align. When they do, I'll take the shot." He studied her, realizing that her calm wasn't indifference. It was mastery. "Then let's make sure we get them in the open," he replied quietly. For the first time, he allowed himself to feel confidence not in his own plan, but in her ability to execute it flawlessly. As the first hints of pre-dawn light crept over the valley, Rebecca settled into her prone position, body perfectly aligned, eye glued to the scope, finger resting lightly on the trigger guard. Every sense was heightened. The chill of the wind, the faint scent of damp earth, the distant murmur of the SEAL team preparing below. She was alone, but completely aware. She was ready. The stage was set for a shot that would test every lesson she had learned from Montana's plains, sniper school, and countless hours of preparation. And so, in the quiet, cold hours of the night, before what would become a historic mission, Rebecca Lawson exemplified everything that made a sniper extraordinary: patience, discipline, calculation, an unshakable calm. She was poised on the brink of action, knowing that tomorrow would demand the kind of precision few had ever achieved. The mountains seemed to hold their breath alongside her. The target would not yet know that its fate was sealed. Dawn peeled back the night like a curtain, thin light unspooling across the Korangal. Rebecca lay flat against the cold rock, her Barrett M82 braced, cheek pressed to the stock, breath measured into a steady rhythm she had practiced 1,000 times. The ridge below unfurled in layers, scrub, rock, narrow trails, and at its farthest edge, a convoy creaked through a defile, men moving with the ragged confidence of those who thought themselves unseen. Her rangefinder had confirmed the distance hours earlier, 3,247 meters. Even in a world built on improbable things, that number sat at the edge of audacity. She ran the mental checklist again, each item snapping into place. Corrected elevation for temperature drop. Adjusted for the crosswind, it had shifted slightly to the east. Recalculated for barometric pressure and the subtle mirage rippling heat above the stones. Her spotter, Corporal Diaz, lay beside her, fingers tapping coordinates into a small tablet, eyes flicking from map to scope. The two of them were a machine, practiced, silent, and utterly in sync. Rebecca trusted Diaz's steady hands, as if they were extensions of her own. Commander Rains watched through binoculars from a safer concealment, closer to the SEAL element. He could see the convoy now, 7 men, a vehicle, one figure clearly in command, gesturing with forceful, practiced motions. Intelligence had flagged the man as the region's operational leader, ruthless, mobile, and intimately familiar with local terrain. Neutralizing him would dissolve a network of planned attacks. The calculus was simple in terms of outcome, impossible in terms of execution. "Confirm again," Rains whispered into his throat mic, not taking his eyes off the ridge. He had never heard Rebecca speak more than necessary, and now even her quiet voice carried the weight of an unspoken promise. "Confirm distance," he said. Diaz exhaled softly. 3,247 meters. Wind 2 degrees east, 8 knots. Elevation plus. Recalculated for temperature drop. "She's dialed." Rebecca inhaled, long and controlled, aligning her reticle on the chest of the man who had caused so many nights of grief for soldiers and villagers alike. Time seemed to thicken. The men below laughed briefly, permitted by the cracked confidence of movement in hostile land. Radios were muted, boots shifted, and a thin cigarette glow dotted one of their faces. Small things, trivial in peace, now became focal points of their fate. She watched the man's shoulders move with every breath, the rhythm of life at that precise distance, and made a choice, not to be hurried by adrenaline, not to be seduced by the drama of the moment. Her father's voice echoed, "The bullet is lazy. It won't go where you want it unless you think for it first." She thought. She counted. She waited until mirage steadied, until the wind held its line. "Take a deep breath," Diaz murmured, the only sound besides distant birds. Rebecca let air out slowly, felt the last tiny tremor of life center into a steady calm, and pressed the trigger. The Barrett answered with a thunder that seemed muted to her, a physical retort she'd known for years. The rifle kicked, recoil slamming up into her shoulder, harsh, immediate, and somehow exquisitely familiar. For an instant, the world split into a pocket of silence. The round leapt from metal and speed and became a small, bright promise crossing a ravine of air. Rebecca tracked through the scope, following the tiny, near-impossible arc, eyes flicking for the faintest sign that math had married reality. 2 heartbeats. 3. Then the man crumpled, a slow, betrayed collapse like a puppet whose strings had been cut. The SEALs below moved, not in a panic, but with the disciplined efficiency of a unit that had been given the advantage it needed. Radio crackled. Target down. Target down. Repeat. Target neutralized. Rains lowered his binoculars and felt a silence like a held breath release. He did not cheer. There was no room for celebration in the thin dawn air, only the gravity of what had happened. He had watched snipers before, lethal artists of distance and patience. But nothing in his experience had prepared him for the view he just witnessed, a human silhouette. 3 kilometers away, rendered motionless by a single, perfectly placed round. He exhaled, a sound that was equal parts awe and relief. Back at Rebecca's position, she kept scanning. The valley responded. Some men froze, confusion blooming across faces. Others dug for weapons with reflexive speed. Rebecca tracked for secondary threats, eyes sweeping beyond the initial target line. Diaz handed her new vectors as the SEALs consolidated and moved to secure the area. They were cautious. An assassination like this could spark an immediate counterattack. But the SEALs were professionals. They advanced with a controlled tempo, using the window her shot had carved out. As the team closed on the fallen man, the radio crackled alive with confirmation from Rains. "We've got visual on the target. He's the one we were called about. Good work." The compliment was terse but weighty. Rebecca let herself breathe deeper now, the tension of the long hold finally uncoiling. She felt no elation. Instead, a quiet, almost mournful respect for the mechanics of exact violence. She had saved lives that day, and that understanding was both solace and burden. Later, in the debrief tent, the facts were dry and clinical. Distance confirmed, shot trajectory, wind corrections, and a clean kill producing immediate tactical gains. Reports would later call it extraordinary. Within the unit, the tone was different. Reverent, pragmatic, and just a touch incredulous. They spoke in measured sentences, as if naming it aloud too loudly might break the fragile balance between skill and chance. Commander Rains paused when he filed his report. He could write the numbers, and the coordinates, and the result. But he could not adequately convey what he had felt looking back across the valley at someone who had performed what seemed like a kind of controlled miracle. Rebecca cleaned her rifle with hands that trembled slightly, not from the recoil, but from the awareness of consequence. She did what she always did, methodically, without fanfare. Corporal Diaz clapped a quiet hand on her shoulder, an acknowledgement from one who had watched the calculations and trusted them like scripture. Rains passed by her station later, leg brushing the sodden earth. He didn't offer speeches. He only said, flat and sincere, "You steadied us." For Rebecca, the moment was not an end, but a line in the continuum of choices that define a shooter's life. She had taken a shot that saved men, altered the immediate tactical landscape, and marked her name in the quiet ledger of dangerous competence. Yet as the sun climbed and warmed the valley, the enormity of distance and choice remained. A bullet traced a path she'd mastered, but its endpoint, the fall of a human life, lingered in the hollow silence that followed. She collected that silence, made an inventory of it, and folded it away, a lesson to carry into the missions yet to come. The valley lay quiet after the operation, almost as if it were honoring the precision that had unfolded hours earlier. Rebecca Lawson slowly withdrew from her firing position, Barrett M82 in hand, each step deliberate, controlled, and silent. The early morning sun cast long shadows over the rugged terrain, illuminating the ravines and ridges she had spent countless hours mapping in her mind. The SEALs moved methodically toward the fallen insurgent leader, their expressions unreadable but disciplined, carrying out the mission's final steps with efficiency born of experience and training. Rebecca followed at a distance, observing, calculating, and remaining vigilant. The mission was a success, but her mind refused to rest. Commander Jacob Rains approached her after the convoy had been secured, binoculars folded against his chest. He studied her face, noting the subtle tension, the focus that had not left her since first spotting the target hours ago. That shot, 3,247 meters? He asked quietly, almost rhetorically. Rebecca did not boast. That's what the calculations gave me. The wind held steady long enough. Her voice was calm, almost detached, but the truth of what she had achieved resonated in every syllable. Rains shook his head, awe mingling with disbelief. He had seen long-range snipers before, but nothing compared to this. A perfect execution at a distance many deemed impossible. Back at the forward operating base, word of the mission spread quickly. Rebecca was already meticulous in cleaning her rifle, noting wind shifts, scope adjustments, and the trajectory data from the shot. Even the seasoned veterans of the SEAL unit watched her with quiet respect, whispering among themselves. "Did you see that trajectory?" One murmured, "That's more than skill. That's art." Despite the admiration, Rebecca remained focused on the essentials: preparation, observation, and the discipline that had allowed her to remain steady under immense pressure. Praise was irrelevant. The mission's success was the measure of her work. The debriefing was clinical, almost antiseptic in tone, but its undercurrents revealed the significance of her accomplishment. Analysts examined the coordinates, the wind calculations, the time of flight for the bullet, and the precision that had neutralized a high-value target without risking lives. Every piece of data confirmed what had already been witnessed. The impossible had been achieved. Rains filed his official report, noting her skill, composure, and the tactical advantage her long-range shot had provided. But beyond the formal record, there was an unspoken acknowledgement of her extraordinary talent, a respect earned not through words, but through action. Yet the aftermath was more than tactical recognition. It carried an emotional weight. Rebecca did not celebrate the shot. She had taken a life, albeit a dangerous one, and she understood the gravity of such decisions. In the quiet of her tent that night, she reflected on what had occurred. Each calculation, every breath, and every second of patient observation had culminated in that moment. She had been prepared for the physics, for the mechanics, and for the strategy, but the human element was inescapable. Responsibility lingered, a silent companion to every sniper who chooses precision over chaos. Her spotter, Corporal Diaz, broke the silence. "You've set a standard that's going to be remembered," he said softly, a mixture of admiration and awe in his tone. Rebecca nodded, accepting the acknowledgement with the same quiet demeanor she had shown all along. "It's not about setting records," she replied. "It's about doing what needs to be done. Correctly." The words were simple, but they carried the weight of her philosophy. Precision, patience, and restraint were inseparable. In the sniper's world, haste and hubris were often fatal. The SEAL team began to debrief, sharing observations and coordinating follow-up reconnaissance. Rains noted her input at every stage, recognizing that her strategic awareness extended beyond the rifle. She identified vantage points, probable movement patterns, and contingency routes, intelligence that would guide subsequent missions. It was clear to everyone present that her skill was multidimensional. She was not only a sniper, but a tactical asset whose calculations could influence an entire operation. Rains felt a profound respect for her, realizing that his initial skepticism had been misplaced. She was a partner, a peer, and a force multiplier. Even as her peers marveled at the precision, Rebecca processed the broader implications of the mission. Neutralizing the insurgent leader had immediate tactical benefits, but it also reshaped the operational landscape. Intelligence networks were disrupted, potential attacks were delayed, and coalition forces gained a crucial advantage. The ripple effects of a single, perfectly executed shot extended far beyond the ridge she had occupied. It was a demonstration of how one individual, guided by discipline, patience, and mastery, could influence events at a scale that few could comprehend. Later, as the sun dipped below the rugged Afghan peaks, casting long shadows across the base, Rains approached her again. This time, his voice carried something more than professional respect. "You've changed how I think about precision," he said. "Most snipers I've worked with rely on instinct. You calculate. You anticipate. You see the shot before it exists." Rebecca simply nodded, her eyes reflecting the dim glow of the setting sun. She had no need for accolades. The mission's success was acknowledgement enough. Yet she also felt the quiet satisfaction that comes from having executed one's training flawlessly, under circumstances that could have shattered the unprepared. As the base settled into evening, Rebecca cleaned her Barrett M82 once more, meticulously documenting every variable and observation from the day. She reviewed the wind readings, the trajectory data, and the environmental conditions, ensuring that her calculations could be referenced for future operations. The meticulousness was habitual, a reflection of the philosophy she had cultivated since childhood. Mastery was not measured by singular achievement, but by the accumulation of precise, repeatable actions. Every detail mattered, every variable accounted for. The human dimension of her role remained with her as she prepared for the next day. She had neutralized a threat, safeguarded lives, and demonstrated a skill few could match. Yet she understood that the aftermath was not about recognition. It was about responsibility. Every shot carried consequences, every decision shaped events, and every action demanded accountability. Rebecca carried that weight with the same calm determination she had applied to her preparation, aware that her path was defined as much by restraint as by skill. By nightfall, the Korangal Valley was quiet once again, the chaos of the morning fading into a tense calm. Rebecca lay back in her bivouac, Barrett cleaned and stowed, and allowed herself a brief moment of reflection. The SEAL team slept nearby, their vigilance unwavering even in relative safety. Commander Rains observed from a distance, a quiet witness to the culmination of her expertise. What had been achieved today would be remembered not only for its tactical success, but for the unprecedented distance and precision involved, a reminder of what discipline, patience, and mastery could accomplish in the most unforgiving of environments. Rebecca Lawson's first major operation had redefined expectations. She had demonstrated that the combination of intellect, patience, and precision could produce results previously considered impossible. Her actions would ripple through the unit, shaping future strategies, tactics, and the way her peers understood the power of a skilled sniper. And though she remained quiet and reserved, her presence was now a known force, one that carried both lethal potential and unwavering professionalism. As she drifted into a light, deliberate sleep, she carried with her the weight and clarity of responsibility. The shot had been executed, the mission successful, and the lives of many secured. Yet for Rebecca, the significance lay not in glory or recognition, but in the discipline and preparation that had made it possible, the same principles that had guided her from the plains of Montana to the cliffs of the Korangal Valley. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, but tonight she had proven the extraordinary power of patience, precision, and the quiet mastery of one human being standing against the odds. Days after her historic 3,247-meter shot, the Korangal Valley felt deceptively ordinary. Dust clung to the base, wind scoured the ridges, and the soldiers moved through routines that masked the extraordinary events of just hours before. For Rebecca Lawson, however, nothing felt ordinary. Every decision she made, every calculation she recorded, carried the echo of what had occurred, a reminder of the fragile line between life and death, the responsibility that came with control, and the price of precision. She moved through the base quietly, observing, analyzing, and preparing for the next phase of operations. Her reputation had grown, both inside the SEAL team and among the broader coalition forces. Whispers of the impossible shot spread quickly, carried from base to base like a quiet legend. Yet Rebecca remained unaffected by fame or praise. She had long understood that the measure of a sniper was not in accolades, but in the mastery of skill, the discipline to remain calm under pressure, and the moral awareness of the consequences of their actions. The bullet had found its mark, but the weight of that mark lingered, an unspoken gravity she carried in her chest. Commander Jacob Rains noticed the change in the unit. Other snipers and sharpshooters began to watch her with a mixture of admiration and curiosity. Many sought her advice, not because she demanded it, but because her composure and methodical approach offered insight into excellence. Rains, recognizing her influence, suggested she take on a mentoring role for new attachments, snipers who were skilled yet inexperienced, soldiers who needed guidance in both marksmanship and tactical awareness. Rebecca agreed quietly, understanding that knowledge was a weapon as vital as the rifle in her hands. Her first mentee was Private First Class Lyle, a young sniper recently attached from another unit. Lyle was talented but impulsive, quick to act without fully assessing his surroundings. Rebecca spent hours with him, teaching not just the mechanics of shooting, but the philosophy behind it. "It's not about speed," she told him, voice calm and deliberate. "It's about patience. Every movement, every breath, every calculation matters. You control what you can. The rest, you let the world handle." She guided him through positioning, wind calculation, and scope adjustment, correcting his errors with precise, gentle instruction. Lyle learned quickly, his respect for her growing with each session. Meanwhile, Rains watched with cautious admiration. He had seen countless soldiers struggle under pressure, their skills undone by fear, overconfidence, or haste. Rebecca's approach was different, meticulous, patient, and fundamentally human. She did not glorify the shot she had taken. She contextualized it, teaching her mentees that precision came with responsibility. "A perfect shot is meaningless if you forget the lives it affects," she explained one afternoon, overlooking the valley from a distant ridge. Lyle nodded, absorbing her words like a student of both marksmanship and morality. Beyond mentoring, Rebecca also reflected on her own path. From Montana's endless plains to the ridges of Afghanistan, she recognized a continuity. Observation, patience, and discipline had always defined her. Yet the human cost of her skill was ever present. Each target neutralized carried consequences that could ripple far beyond the battlefield. She felt the weight of that truth keenly. Late at night, in the solitude of her tent, she revisited the details of the 3,247-meter shot, wind direction, bullet trajectory, target movement, and allowed herself to acknowledge both the skill and the responsibility that had made it possible. The SEAL team increasingly relied on her judgment for strategic planning. She identified vantage points, predicted enemy patrols, and calculated the optimal timing for maneuvers. Her presence had become indispensable. Yet she remained humble, insisting that precision was a product of preparation, not innate talent. "The rifle doesn't make the shot," she reminded Rains once. "The preparation, the calculations, the calm that makes the shot. The rifle is just a tool." Her philosophy resonated deeply with those around her, altering the culture of their unit to value observation, patience, and methodical planning as much as raw courage. Rebecca also grappled with the personal implications of her skill. Each mission reminded her that life and death were often decided by a millimeter of calculation, a second of hesitation, or a subtle misreading of conditions. She found herself thinking of her father constantly, recalling his lessons about patience and responsibility. Montana had taught her to see the land, to respect the environment, and to approach every action with deliberate thought. Sniper school had sharpened her mind, instilled discipline, and taught the mechanics of long-range engagement. But Afghanistan, Combat itself demanded moral judgment. Every shot was a lesson, and every decision carried weight she could never fully escape. Despite the intensity, Rebecca discovered moments of quiet reflection. She would sit on distant ridges after missions, observing the valley, the light shifting across ridges and cliffs, the wind moving through sparse vegetation. In those moments, she connected with the same calm she had known as a child in Montana, the clarity of observation, the focus of patience. These periods of solitude allowed her to process the tension, to reconcile the precision she executed with the human consequences it entailed. She understood that mastery was as much about mental equilibrium as mechanical skill. The unit began to recognize the duality of her talent, lethal efficiency paired with ethical clarity. Other snipers learned from her not only how to calculate bullet trajectories, but how to make decisions under pressure, how to weigh the cost of action, and how to remain composed in life-and-death situations. Her mentorship created a ripple effect. Soldiers who once rushed into engagement now paused to assess, measure, and anticipate, transforming the operational effectiveness of the team as a whole. Rains, observing this transformation, felt a profound respect for her leadership. He knew that the 3,247-meter shot was legendary, but her influence extended far beyond that single moment. She had elevated the unit, teaching discipline, observation, and ethical decision-making in ways that no single mission report could capture. "She's more than a sniper," Rains remarked quietly to another officer. "She's a teacher, a strategist, and a living reminder that control is power and responsibility." As weeks passed, Rebecca continued her quiet vigilance, balancing operational demands with mentorship and observing both the terrain and her fellow soldiers. Each day reinforced a central truth she had carried from Montana to Afghanistan. Mastery was not measured in individual glory, but in the ability to act precisely, ethically, and decisively in critical moments. Her name had become a quiet legend, not because she sought attention, but because her actions demanded recognition. In the solitude of night, as the base settled under a starry Afghan sky, Rebecca reflected on her journey. The 3,247-meter shot had tested her skill, discipline, and mental fortitude. Mentoring young snipers had tested her patience, empathy, and ability to impart wisdom. And the consequences of her actions had reminded her constantly that mastery carried weight beyond the mechanics of the rifle. She felt the quiet satisfaction of fulfillment, tempered by awareness of responsibility. Precision, she understood, was not only a skill, it was a philosophy, a way of seeing the world with clarity, calculation, and care. By the time dawn approached again over the Coincidental Valley, Rebecca Lawson had become more than a sniper. She had become a mentor, a strategist, and a moral compass for those who shared her path. Her influence extended beyond the single extraordinary shot, shaping a unit, guiding new recruits, and embodying the principles that had defined her life from the plains of Montana to the ridges of Afghanistan. The weight of precision rested upon her shoulders, but she bore it with the calm certainty of someone who had learned the value of patience, preparation, and responsibility, lessons that would guide every mission yet to come. The Coincidental Valley had quieted in the weeks following the mission that had defined Rebecca Lawson's early career. Yet even in calm, the imprint of her presence lingered. Soldiers moved with a new awareness, a heightened attention to terrain, wind, and timing. Mentorship sessions she had led became small, ritualized practices. Recruits learned to calculate, observe, and anticipate rather than act on instinct alone. Rebecca watched from the ridgelines, Barrett M82 always within reach, but her role had evolved from solitary precision to guiding an entire unit toward a higher standard. Commander Jacob Rains approached her quietly one afternoon, scanning the valley before sitting on a rock nearby. He had seen countless snipers in his years, men and women who were precise and disciplined. But Rebecca was different. She had taken the impossible shot. Yes, but she had done more than that. She had transformed the culture of the unit, elevating everyone around her. "You've changed how we operate," he said simply. "Not just the shot. Everything." Rebecca allowed herself a small nod, a rare acknowledgement of satisfaction. Over the following weeks, she focused on refining the skills of her mentees. She taught them to read the environment, how a flicker of sunlight, a whisper of wind, or a subtle shift in shadow could indicate danger or opportunity. She demonstrated the power of patience, to wait for the exact moment when physics, terrain, and timing aligned perfectly. She emphasized responsibility, ensuring every sniper understood the human weight behind every trigger pull. Her lessons were not theoretical. They were born of experience, of the hundreds of calculations, hours of observation, and the historic long-distance shot that had cemented her reputation. Recruits absorbed her teachings with a mixture of awe and apprehension. Many had never encountered a sniper whose precision extended beyond mechanics into strategy and ethics. She challenged them to consider consequences, not just results. "Your bullet is more than metal and powder," she explained during an evening training session. "It's a decision, a responsibility. Respect the distance, respect the target, respect yourself. That's the only way to operate with control." Her words sank in, leaving an indelible mark on soldiers who would carry her influence into future operations. The operational tempo of the SEAL unit remained high. Missions in the valley were constant, unpredictable, and dangerous. Yet Rebecca had become indispensable, not only as a sniper, but as a strategist and observer. She coordinated overwatch positions, anticipated enemy movements, and integrated intelligence into actionable guidance. Her ability to maintain calm under pressure inspired others, especially during moments when hesitation could have deadly consequences. Rains began to rely on her judgment as much as he relied on any member of his team, trusting her calculations and instincts implicitly. As the weeks turned into months, Rebecca also reflected on her personal journey. She had arrived in Afghanistan as a sniper skilled in mechanics, precision, and calculation. She had left as a mentor, a strategist, and a moral guide. Her historic shot had given her notoriety, but the real measure of success lay in the lives saved, the lessons imparted, and the culture of responsibility she had nurtured within the team. Each mission reinforced the delicate balance between skill and consequence, teaching her that mastery was not measured by a single achievement, but by sustained discipline, ethical awareness, and the ability to influence others positively. One evening, Rains and Rebecca surveyed the valley from a familiar ridge. The wind rustled lightly through sparse vegetation, and the distant rivers murmured quietly. "I've been in war zones for decades," Rains said, voice low, almost reflective. "I've seen remarkable people, but you've redefined what a sniper can be." Rebecca studied the landscape, taking in every detail before responding. "It's never about me," she said simply. "It's about precision, preparation, and responsibility. If we can make the difference for the people around us, that's the achievement." He nodded slowly, understanding the quiet weight of her philosophy, a combination of lethal skill and unwavering discipline, tempered by ethics and patience. Rebecca's influence extended beyond immediate operations. Her precision and mentorship inspired tactical innovation, prompting commanders to rethink how snipers were integrated into missions. They were no longer just shooters. They were observers, strategists, and teachers. Every calculation she made, every lesson she shared, left a lasting impact on the unit, enhancing operational effectiveness while preserving lives. Her approach demonstrated that mastery was holistic. It combined mechanical skill, mental discipline, and moral clarity, creating an example for others to emulate. Despite the growing recognition, Rebecca remained humble. She continued her rigorous routines, meticulous equipment checks, repeated calculations, and constant observation. She pushed herself and those around her to maintain the highest standards, understanding that in warfare, precision could mean the difference between life and death. Even as she trained others, she refined her own skills, exploring long-range mathematics, advanced wind reading, and environmental adaptation. Every mission became both practice and lesson, reinforcing the philosophy she had developed over years of dedication. The soldiers who trained under her carried her influence into subsequent operations. They adopted her disciplined approach, combining observation with patience and ethical responsibility. Recruits who had once rushed shots began to calculate, anticipate, and observe before acting. The culture she fostered became embedded in the unit, a living legacy of precision and calm that extended beyond her individual actions. Her historic shot remained remarkable, but the true impact lay in the way she had shaped others to think, act, and lead with the same careful attention she embodied. In quiet moments, Rebecca reflected on the journey from Montana to Afghanistan. The lessons of her childhood, patience, observation, and respect for the environment had carried her across continents and into moments that demanded precision of both action and thought. Sniper school had honed her mechanics, but experience had instilled understanding. Her historic shot, while extraordinary, was only a single point on a continuum of responsibility, skill, and ethical awareness that defined her career. As the sun set over the valley, casting long shadows across ridges and cliffs, Rebecca stood with her Barrett M82 slung across her back, surveying the land she had come to know intimately. Her mentees moved with quiet competence nearby, embodying the lessons she had instilled. Commander Rains watched from a short distance, silently acknowledging the extraordinary influence she had exerted on the unit. The weight of precision, responsibility, and mastery rested on her shoulders, yet she bore it with the calm certainty that had defined her since her earliest days in Montana. Rebecca Lawson's story was more than a record of a single incredible shot. It was a testament to the combination of skill, discipline, and ethical awareness that transforms a soldier into a leader. Her legacy lay not in fame, but in the lives she influenced, the standard she set, and the enduring principle that precision and responsibility are inseparable. The Coincidental Valley, rugged and unforgiving, had witnessed the emergence of a sniper who embodied mastery in its fullest sense, a woman whose name would quietly resonate across the unit, in the minds of those she trained, and in the echoes of every mission executed with care, calculation, and courage. As night fell, Rebecca returned to her tent, Barrett cleaned and ready, notes recorded meticulously. She allowed herself a moment to breathe, aware that her journey was ongoing. The valley, the missions, and the challenges ahead remained, but she was prepared, disciplined, and resolute. Her story, already extraordinary, was still unfolding, a narrative defined not only by impossible shots, but by the quiet, enduring influence of a sniper who had mastered her craft and carried it with unwavering responsibility. And so, in the shadows of the Coincidental Valley, Rebecca Lawson stood as a living legacy, precision, patience, and moral clarity personified, guiding not only the trajectory of a bullet, but the trajectory of the soldiers who followed in her footsteps.